How about now?
No, still spinning.
You don't see it. Okay. How about now?
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Yes, we do now.
Okay,
Yes, we
please
do.
say with me, everyone. Oh, gracious God, you have given
You
us
have
the
given us
model
the
of
model
charity
of
in
charity
St.
in
Martin de
St. Martin de
Porres.
Porres.
May this humble brother, renowned for his care of the poor, the sick, and the lonely, inspire us to follow his example. St. Martin, as a true son of St. Dominic, you proclaim the gospel in your every action. Even lowly animals knew your care. Intercede for us that we too may bring others to know Jesus Christ. In our joys and sorrows, may your life remind us of the Father's mercy, of our call to holiness in the Holy Spirit, and of our salvation through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Okay, this is our last class, of course, and I appreciate those who were able to bear with me. I haven't been always on top of the material as I'd like, and this is a pretty heady material. I think when we talked about, when we announced a class on moral theology or morals, you're thinking of, things we can do, things that we can't do, and this has been mostly philosophy. An important understanding of the human person, but not an easy do this, don't do that. Okay, I want to tell you about some future activities that we have. January 12th, this is, I don't know if any of you are close to downtown. We have Mass at the Shrine every day, a weekday at 12:05. Beginning January 12th, we're going to start a novena, 9 Wednesdays in a row. We'll be praying for the health in the new year, especially, and then people should bring their own private intentions. So if there's something that you find very important in your life, you might make the novena with us. And it's also available online. The Mass is always streamed, so you can find it at this address. And I'll be sending you notice of this again. But the novena will take about 5 minutes at the after Mass ends, and you can see it online as well. Then on Wednesday, February the 16th to 23rd, of course, this is another 2 months away, we're going to begin a course on the Acts of the Apostles. Interesting this year, of course, we're reading from the Gospel of Luke almost every Sunday, and now we'll take the sequel of the Gospel of Luke in the Acts of the Apostles. We have 5 Wednesdays. This will really duplicate what we have here. We're going to be meeting, I believe, in the same room if you want to come in person, but we'll also stream it for you, and you can see it online. And then in April, and this is quite a way in the future, but I want to meditate with you on the Passion in the Gospel of Luke. And I think you will be very surprised when we go through this Passion, pretty much step by step, almost, not quite, verse by verse, how Luke has some surprising elements that we don't, most of us are not aware of, because all of the events of the Passion seem to blend together in our minds as we go year by year. We read another Passion on Palm Sunday, and then the Good Friday we always read the Gospel of John. Anyway, those are some upcoming events I wanted to make you aware of. Now let's get into our material. We're going to be talking about natural law and freedom. Again, philosophical concepts, but I think when we reflect upon them, we can find them very helpful to our lives. But when we talk about natural law, we have to forget about law as telling us what to do or what not to do. You know, it's against the law to drive cars 40 miles an hour on city streets, something like that. That is not what the natural law is about. But there are precepts of the natural law. These are, say, rules that are developed from the natural law, and we want to look at some of those precepts. As a matter of fact, I have a little schema that I thought of yesterday and today that I think will help us to appreciate the natural law itself. And one of those things that we do for every statement, inclination of natural law, is to talk about some of its precepts. I'll get to that in a few minutes. We can think of natural law as kind of like the laws of thermodynamics, inclinations, tendencies. You can violate the laws of the natural law and laws of thermodynamics. Of course, you can't violate. You can't really go against them. But anyway, they're in the same sense that they're tendencies. They're the way the human person operates. As we can say, thermodynamics is the way that heat is transferred. The idea of natural law is the human participation in the wisdom and goodness of the Creator. Now, just to reflect on that for a few minutes, it isn't just how things act, because we're saying you can violate the natural law, but it's the ability of the human person, not strictly by himself or herself, but of human people to examine their lives, examines other people's lives as well, and see what is the inclinations, what are the primary inclinations that we have in being human. So we say this is a human participation in the wisdom and goodness, the providence of God. We participate in it by observing and then by writing down or what we observe in our actions and other people's actions as well. Okay, the natural law states the first and essential precepts that govern the moral life, what we should do and what we can't do. These are the precepts of the natural law that help us to live rightly, to live good lives. We can say Christian lives, but we really mean is natural law. Everyone is obligated to follow the natural law. So it's not necessarily Christian lives. As a matter of fact, there are things that Christ demands of people that are not contained in the natural law. We've talked about that. Love your enemies, he would say. Turn the other cheek. This is divine revelation, and Jesus gives us so that we really can be sons and daughters of God and find ourselves with God in eternal life. The precepts of the natural law are universal. They apply to everyone in every place and at every time. But I say that, and then we have to add quickly, the application of the natural law varies greatly. Excuse, I didn't, I forgot to that word. Application there varies greatly. What do we mean here? Well, one example, maybe not the best example, is say lying. Now, some people consider the everything you say has to be true. Other people will quite readily excuse what we call white lie, or well, you know what I mean by white lie. And I mean, in different societies, people have different ways of considering that. But everyone knows that there is such a thing as a lie and that we shouldn't do it. Whether that's going to include joking or not is another question. But we know that lying is wrong. And it is always wrong throughout history. This is not going to change with social media. With the social, as being one example of how people are excusing different changes that we have in our life today because of social media. It's not going to change with social, nor anything. Lying will always be wrong. Adultery will always be wrong. Even though some places they may be more lax about it, might excuse it more readily. Having relations with another person's wife or husband is always going to be wrong. And then we know that the natural law, that everybody has it, that everybody follows it, will make our society livable. It's the foundation of society and the basis of civil law. Civil law are just, should be just kind of particular offshoots, particular applications of natural law. Now, this is important. I think I've mentioned this to you, that if we're going to talk about human rights, and it's a very important concept, that people's basic rights are always respected. We have to base it in something, and the best way to base it is in talking about a natural law. So some people can say, well, in my country, you're not free to practice the religion that you have, that you believe in. People have to practice the religion of the country. Well, that's a violation of human rights. We know that. Why is it a violation of human rights? Because the freedom to practice one religion is based in natural law. Probably that would be the inclination to know, if I have that thing. But we're going to talk about the inclinations of natural law and how to apply them. Okay. We want to ask a question. Is natural law internal or external to the human person? Is it something that is imposed upon the person from outside, or is it the way that we know how from just observing ourselves and what brings us joy and what seems to be right? We know that this is the natural law, or is it something that we have to always learn from the outside? That's the question. it seems to be an affront to freedom, and talk about any law for those who have a sense of freedom as freedom of indifference, where you do whatever you want to do unless it's restricted by law. Saying that there's a natural law does seem to offend or limit this thing that we like to think as something good, freedom. So if for a person who really accepts the freedom of indifference, that one can do anything that they want as long as it's not prohibited by a law, then you would see natural law as external. And what's important is this freedom to do. But as I mentioned before, kind of anticipated it, it's whether it's a internal, so that everybody can accept and believe it, or external, it's got to be imposed by the government or one's religion. It is important because we want to think about this universality so that we can claim human rights. People can be assured that they have a right to, as we said before, worship as they choose, a right to participate in the government that they have. And of course, the other human rights, the right to life itself. Okay, and we've talked about the freedom for excellence. With it, the yearnings of the mind, and I should be, okay. With the freedom for excellence, the yearnings of the mind and heart give a foundation in freedom of natural law. Probably better to say have a foundation in freedom of natural law. It is the perfection of doing what nature intends us to do. That's a way of talking about natural law. The perfection of doing what we are supposed to do. And this, I think, goes well with all that we've said before, especially when we're talking about the freedom for excellence. When we have, when the natural law is deeply embedded within us, we can act as good citizens, as good relatives, as good people in general, for our benefit and for the benefit of society. Okay, so we have 5 inclinations that establish the natural law within us. These are an inclination to the good. Everyone wants to do the good and to avoid evil. Now, sometimes their idea of good is tarnished, and yet there is a something calling them in them that that's putting them back to the real notion of good. There's an inclination to preserve being, that is, we want to live and to also allow other people to live. Another inclination, very fundamental, is this inclination to marry. The sex drive is included here, but directed toward one person for the good of the person and also for the good of society. We're going to go through these in detail. Inclination to know the truth. All of us want to know the truth, and that establishes a right to the truth and also an obligation to tell the truth. and then an inclination to live in society. We're going to see that this inclination is not just so that we can live more conveniently, but also that we can develop our who we are as people, being considering that a truly good human being loves and appreciates other people. Okay, so I want us to try to think in terms of what precepts every one of these inclinations engender. What precepts are come from these each of these five inclinations of natural law. We would also, it's helpful to think of the rights and the duties that the natural law I don't want to say imposes upon us, but the natural law calls us to. What rights and duties do we have because of these inclinations? What virtues do we need to perfect these inclinations so that we can act always in accordance with the natural law, that we can act perfectly in accordance with the natural law? As we say, it takes time to develop as it takes time for a virtuoso, much practice on the piano to play the piano that way. It takes time to develop our character so that we always do what is good, what is loving, what brings us, as we talked, I think last week, what brings us true joy and will lead us to perfect happiness. It takes effort, and we need the virtues to do that. So we also want to ask ourselves, what virtue does each of these inclinations use to be developed? And then we might look at a corresponding commandment. What I mean is here is the 10 Commandments are sometimes called the complete expression of natural law. If you look at each of the commandments, kind of, if you draw what's in every one of the commandments, you would have a sense of what each of these inclinations tells us what we should do. So we could ask, is this command, is this principle of the natural law? It's just an obvious one. Say the inclination to marry. Well, obviously, the 6th commandment relates to this inclination to marry. You have an inclination to marry, but you shouldn't commit adultery. Violation of the marriage covenant. Okay, so we want to start with the first inclination of natural law, the natural inclination to the good and the repulsion of evil. All of us are inclined to do good and are repulsed by evil. Let me look at my notes too here now. The good is a quality that attracts us and causes us to love and to experience joy. And we can kind of classify the different types of good in the same way that we have different kinds of friendship. I don't know if, of course, if you've heard of the 3 different kinds of friendship. Some people are our friends because they are just nice to be around, or they're fun, you know. These people we might spend some time with, but they are not necessarily those we want to really share our lives with. It's good for, you know, an occasional visit. There are other people who are our friends because we need them to make to fulfill our needs in living. I think of these as our co-workers, not necessarily the people that we would spend a lot of time with outside of work, but yet we need them, and we develop kind of relations because they are useful to us in pursuing what we need to live on. And finally, there are the people who are we want to relate to because they are good in themselves. They bring us to develop the fullness of our human capacity, or at least fuller. Again, the fullness of human capacity is tremendous, but at least they would help us to become more loving, to become more sensitive, to become wiser in what we do. So there are three kinds of friendship, and we can look at the good in the same way. There are things which are pleasurable. We say they are good to have. There are things that are useful so that we can fulfill our life's goals. Even we say one is good, this is better, but the best is the things that are good in themselves. That and these will be invariably people that we want into our lives. You know, say our pets. Our pets, they give us a warm feeling. They give us a sense of being needed and all that. So they're pleasurable, and they may even be useful. But I don't think we should see pets as, and I know there will be some people who want to object to this, but I don't think we can see pets as good in themselves. They are not going to bring us to an understanding to an understanding of ourselves and of our destiny. Okay, that's we always our will, this determining decision maker that we have within us, always chooses the good. Now, sometimes people, if we always choose the good, then anything that the will decides is really good. That's not what we're saying. It always chooses things under the aspect of the good. That's a much better way of saying it. So say, you know, we're in a jam, we want to tell a lie, and we tell the lie so that we can get out of a jam and just feel more relaxed. That aspect of the good, getting out of a jam, feeling more relaxed, is what we go for. But it is not a true good. It is not something that we should do. It is an apparent good, but actually an evil. And we say that the loved object can distort us when our wills clings to what is evil. That the drug addict can, even though he or she knows that this is not good, it is killing them. Their wills are so distorted by this pleasure that they give that they continue desiring it, can continue choosing it. But still, they know that they are doing wrong. just an example, I got a Christmas card from Patrick Johnson. He's a prisoner in Florida, convicted of murder. And he was given he was out on what do they call it? What am I saying? Parole. He was given parole, and he got on the outside, and he committed the same, going cocaine and doing violent things again. He says that he knows that he shouldn't do it, but he can't help himself. This is what we say sometimes: a love object can distort us, so that we continue to choose it. And we have the first, we can call it a principle of morality. We are to do good and to avoid evil. What is the moral life? It is choosing the good and avoiding or refusing to do what is evil. Very simply stated. But that's just a general principle. We have to flesh that out in different situations. So the virtues that we need to develop the good are things like fortitude or courage to do what is right even when it is difficult, prudence to do what is good in a concrete situation is very helpful here too. I wonder if anyone can give a commandment that this inclination to the good might engender. Or what commandment kind of incorporates this inclination? Okay, the golden rule. It's not one of the 10 commandments. They have a golden rule, of course. Do unto others what you would have them to do to yourself. You're choosing the good for others as we want to choose the good for ourselves. Partly, I was thinking though the third commandment rather than the fourth. We love God because God is good. Huh? We can say that this is so general that it incorporates the fourth as well. But the fourth is very important, say, on this marriage and family when we consider that. Okay, that is just, let me see if I want to say anything else here. Okay. I give another, as you see in your notes, I don't know if you have them before you, temperance will move us to stop drinking so that we don't offend another. The virtues develop our inclination toward good by generating concrete actions that satisfy the desire, the deeply ingrained inclinations, the desire to justice and love. And so temperance will be included there, that we always treat others justly, and so we don't want to drink too much and start maybe abusing others. Okay, let's go on to the natural and the inclination to preserve our being. We want to continue living and not just to breathe, but to prosper, to thrive. So this inclination moves us to conserve our life, to eat good food, wholesome food. It also will legitimate self-defense. if someone is jeopardizing our life, we have a right, and this is one of the rights I called before, to defend ourselves so that we won't be hurt, violated. Our right to life would not be violated. It also it's not static. It's, you know, we don't just in this desire to live, we're not just talking about existence. We're talking about thriving. We want to improve ourselves. So this natural inclination to preserve being also is seen in this desire to improve our state in life, to become better, to become more healthy by exercise. I want to say, and in a sense, it does include this desire to develop our mental capacities, but a lot of that is in the third inclination, or the fourth inclination, that is to know. Okay, at a spiritual level, this inclination engenders a love of self, but a proper love of self. When I say proper love of self, that we really are building up ourselves. We can say, and I don't mean just in a very pietistic way, we are building up ourselves in the eyes of God. We are becoming better human beings. Our desire to be beings, our inclination to preserve our being moves us to do things that will help ourselves. Yet, there are times when we forsake this desire to live for greater goods. Certainly, the people who give their lives in defense of their country, they do it for other people and the common good. In this case, is greater than the individual good of having life. So that's possible. And of course, martyrs do it to give witness to Christ, to tell the whole world that Christ is the one that we should live for and try to emulate. Okay, this is this inclination is inculcated, is incorporated in the fifth commandment. We are not to kill others, and we are not to commit suicide ourselves. And some of the virtues that we have, hope that we things can get better, especially the theological hope that we might have eternal life with God. And courage, again, to do what is necessary, even when it's difficult to preserve our lives. This courage is sometimes called fortitude, and fortitude may apply here when we talk about the wherewithal to exercise daily, to be moderate in the foods and drink that we have. Okay, I'm going to try to go through that little schema that I developed before. And I would like you to respond if you can think, what precepts would you give from this natural inclination to preserve being? I mean, what rules do you think this inclination generates? Anybody? I mean, just simple ones, of course. One rule is don't commit suicide. Suicide is wrong. That would be a simple one. Yeah, okay, yeah, euthanasia. That's good. It's a good, but we are the trouble with euthanasia. We are not to determine when a person lives and dies. So that would be a definite moral precept. How about rights and duties? What rights do you think this? About the preamble of the Constitution. Preamble of the yeah. Say it. Yeah. Sometimes we think of the when we talk about natural law, we think of the Declaration of Independence, because Thomas Jefferson talks about these are rights that are given by the Creator and the Creator's law. Yeah. Okay, this is a one precept very dear to Catholics, and I think to a growing number when people start to reflect on it, is the question of abortion. It's wrong to abort a baby. Well, this is the reason. In this inclination that we all have to live and recognize our responsibility to assure the life of other people. So we demonstrate or at least vote with this in mind.
Father.
Yes, go on, Aline.
Isn't it wrong for what's happening in this country now with our democracy? In terms of, do you understand what I'm saying? As an African American, we are terrified of what's going on in this country with the Republicans. Because, like, for example, Biden is trying to come up with a conference on human rights.
Yeah.
China said, how you all are going to tell us something about human rights when you all have gone 400 years and you haven't done anything for Black people. You're still mistreating them. So do you follow me on this?
I do. I'm not sure if I don't accept everything that you're saying. I mean, 400 years.
We're still suffering, you know, with racism and all, like the voting that's going on now. Like the Republicans are making it hard for Black and brown people to vote, and it terrifies you. Donald Trump terrifies us.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of reasons that I think people are wary of Donald Trump. But let's try to put that in a, and I think you're onto something that
I want you to put it in perspective for me as an African American.
Sure.
Because I am just, I'm doing Bible groups. I go to mass. I put my money in church, and I do the readings. But I am just, no matter how I pray the rosary and I do what I think is right and go to confession, I'm still terrified as an African American in this country now. It's just the things that are happening. It's frightening for us.
Yeah, I can know that you have children and they are being this kind of what is it, profiled and just because of the
and even the laws in the Supreme Court and the Republicans, they just everything that it's just terrifying.
Okay. Well, it's good to hear your perspective there, and I think that helps us all to to think
And I wish from a white
beyond our
perspective,
own
you could
homes.
explain
And,
it to me.
yeah, go ahead.
Can somebody, a Caucasian, explain it to me? Because I just cannot, I just don't understand it. And it's not because I'm illiterate. I have all kinds
Hardly.
I'll say that as a white person, it terrifies me as well. Like, you're not, especially in the Catholic Church. I think for me, a lot of peace I get is especially listening to masses from a lot of Jesuits, like Jesuit parishes. They really make me feel like the church hears those concerns, and that is something that's real. So, like, I mean, I go to mass in Memphis, but like I said, I also listen to those kind of masses, and you know, I am strongly opposed to all that as well. And I will just say, I don't have any tips for like how to change that, and even from an ethical perspective, but I know that something that helps me feel more at peace is when I read, you know, literature out there that you know, people know, you know, and from a Black perspective, I guess, to read about that.
Okay, let me go on. This is something that we have discussed before, and we're going to discuss again. Maybe not tonight, but we'll have other classes, and I hope Aileen participates, and I'm sure she will bring up incidents in her life and in the life of her family and friends that will awaken the consciousness of all of us. Let me go ahead though with the natural inclination to marry, the third inclination of the natural law. This, of course, has to is partly sexual, but it isn't. It isn't just this inclination to have sex with another person. There's a dimension of this inclination to marry that we want to improve our lives by a special relation with one person for all of one's life. This is the idea. And so we have a, okay. We have in, say, the Catholic teaching, there are two ends of marriage. One, to have a family, to satisfy this sexual drive, but also another one, to love another person, to always be there to help that person become a better person. So it's not only physical or sexual, but also spiritual as well, the spiritual dimension to this inclination. It is regulated by the fourth commandment. We mentioned this commandment before, but honor your father and mother. We in our families, we grow in our families. Children must obey their parents. Adults must take care of their parents, so this generation can go on. The sixth commandment is quite obvious. Adultery is a great offense against marriage. And then the ninth commandment, which tells us to be modest, so that we can keep our chastity. To be modest and to be not to be lustful, to take care of what we are looking at. So this inclination instills a right to marry. Marriage is not something that can be prohibited. Everyone has a right to marry. As a matter of fact, this is some of the one of the great evils of slavery is that people were controlled. They weren't allowed to marry as they wanted to. And this was one of the great offenses of that. And it also instills duties, the duties, the responsibilities that husbands have for their wives and wives for their husband, to think together, to help one another to become better people. And of course, children are that they have to obey their parents so that they can learn and become better human beings. Okay, this priest, Father Pinqueres, wants to remind us that virginity does not contradict this tendency. Virginity is a way to give witness to Christ. Now, this is voluntary virginity we have in mind here. It's a witness again to another good. It's like we talked about in preserving life. Sometimes we give our lives for the good of the country, and so virgins give their lives to Christ as a witness that he is alive. Yes, many of them would like to have their own families, but they see this as a greater value, so they forsake that desire to have their own family. Let's do it again. See if you can give some precepts first of that this inclination engenders. We talk, and I'm just thinking about obvious things. What does our inclination to marry and to have a family, what precepts, what does it oblige us to do or maybe prohibit us from doing?
Did you say what did it prohibit us from doing?
Yeah, that would be another precept.
Okay, divorce.
Right, okay, good, yeah. Divorce is unlawful, we cannot divorce, that's excellent.
But they do it all the time and remarry.
Yeah, sure. But I think they do that with some tinge of guilt. They know it, you know, they made the promises and here they're turning back. This is a very difficult situation. Of course, the church does not recognize divorce, but we do examine marriages very carefully and can annul some. But I'm not saying that everyone follows these laws. I tried to say at the beginning that these laws are violated often. Yes. Some of them, though, the civil law has to enforce. Say killing, murder. That would be the civil law has to take this into consideration as to prohibit murder and to punish those who do it. Go ahead. Pornography, very good, huh? Looking at pornography is wrong. It's a sin. Very good. David, did you have something?
Yes. Besides the more obvious chastity rules, there could be some don'ts on don't abuse a spouse either emotionally, physically, or
okay, right, good. Yeah, these are
and then duties. I like the next to last bullet point about duties to children. And so society picks up on some of that by having, in severe cases, they can, the state can take custody of the children,
right, under
child protection, various rules among the, localities there. And on the positive side, instead of just merely the don'ts. It would be to build up the common good in society, to properly educate the children. And that
right. So I think we're going there. There is a precept to educate your children, but it's more in the realm of rights and responsibilities. We have a right to have children, but we also have the responsibility of raising them, educating them, teaching them how to live well. Anybody else with any other rights and responsibilities that go hand in hand with this inclination of natural law?
Well, what about contraception?
Okay.
I mean, you want us to, I mean, the church wants us to have children, but if people can't afford to educate them, I'm not pro-abortion by any means.
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking, you know, what is the answer to that?
Well,
what do we do?
The way the church sees it, Peg, is that people can not have sex when they know that they could conceive,
right?
And
which doesn't work very well for a lot of people.
Now,
I'm just telling you.
You know, there's I've debated this sometimes. The scientists say, granted that sometimes it takes more discipline than other times, but for some people it takes more discipline than others. But they say you can be pretty sure with the methods that they give now, not just counting days, of course, but of you've heard of that, taking temperature, and mucus. So the church would say that. There is an interesting thing. You can't impose this, and I suspect that it is very, it can be very difficult. But a lot of people, it seems that they want to have everything, and okay, so you can't buy your kid a telephone when he goes to high school, or at least an expensive telephone. The simplified life. That's another way I think to respond to that question. Certainly, it. Well, I don't want to get too much talk in these talks about sexuality, but everyone has a right to marry, and of course to satisfy their sexual desires in that way. Not necessarily all the time, as sometimes married people can't live together. There's one doctor, she came to Mass on the day before St. Jude, and she was saying that she has a distance, what do they call it? Distant marriage. Her and her husband live in different places. Well, they are, I suppose you can say, freely restricting themselves so that they can have this exclusive relationship themselves. Okay, any other rights and responsibilities? And we talked about the commandments that really touch on this. The fourth commandment, honor your parents. The sixth commandment, not to commit adultery. And then the ninth commandment. Okay, let's move on. The natural inclination to know the truth. This will engender a love of truth and wisdom. And we're going to talk about them. It engages the virtues of science. Science is the capacity to study and to direct one's action. This desire to learn more. That's what science means. Wisdom, which is the ability to draw knowledge and experience into a unified vision of life. So you know what is good and what is wrong because of your experience, because of what you've learned. And I don't mean in general, I mean very specific ways. One fellow used to say, you know, knowledge will tell you that a tomato is a fruit and not a vegetable. Wisdom tells you that tomatoes don't belong in fruit salad. So this is the way he said. So it's a general that you have a greater appreciation of life and how to live it from this learning and from say book knowledge and experience. Of course, it's the 8th commandment that tells us that we don't lie to others. We don't bear false witnesses. We don't say things that are untrue about others. That's the general commandment that is, but we want to, that has to be drawn out with other precepts that we'll get to in a minute. And so this establishes a right to education. Everyone has a right, especially in our modern societies, more and more to higher levels of education. I suppose, 2,000 years ago, everyone had a right to education. Their parents might teach them grammar or how to apply a trade, to teach them in the trade of the family. Now, of course, with more means, everyone has a right to, in our country at least, to a secondary education. So forth. And a duty, the right and the duty to cultivate it. We have to keep on trying to develop our minds. We shouldn't be static. I suppose if we were going to talk about some precepts is, don't watch too much television because it affects your mind. It might be a very general precept, but we might have that. I like this one. Is this inclination is the foundation of a greater sense of faith. Faith is not only trust in the Lord. That's what it is in its basic meaning, this relationship with the Lord, but it's also a matter of knowing about the Lord and loving him because we know that he is all good or all powerful, and how the Lord has operated in history. This is what theologians do. They try to understand the Lord's actions. Well, that gives us a better appreciation that we can love the Lord more. Okay, again, let me ask you what precepts may come from this? Anybody?
I would elaborate on not just prohibiting lies. I think something can be even as bad or worse than lies sometimes, and that's distortions.
Okay.
Or not mentioning the total context or the nuances. And slander, we don't necessarily immediately think of that as a lie, but it's still a tearing down someone to build yourself up or step on somebody to elevate yourself.
I think the idea of slander is, the definition is telling of an untruth saying aloud an untruth of another person. But anyway, what you're saying is right. These would be precepts. You do not slander. And then libel is putting in print something that is untrue about another. And that, of course, would make another precept. Any other precepts you want to include here?
You said stay away from television.
Stay away from social media, Craig says. That's a tough one. You know, it has a lot of value. Almost every church has their Facebook page, and it's very convenient for people to do it. But maybe we can say, definitely, I think this is probably pretty universal. Limit your social media, huh? You don't spend all your time there. Well, that's a good example for our time. Rights and duties, what do you think? Other rights besides the right to education, high school education, any other rights and duties does this inclination make us? Virginia?
Well, I have something, again, with looking at the child, that when you have children, you need to really try to help them find the truth. I don't know.
Give us an example. Virginia says, as a mother, she has to help the child know the truth. How do you mean that?
Well, sometimes you have to say that friend is just not a good friend for you.
Okay, yeah.
That it brings out bad behavior or bad decisions, let's put it that way.
Yeah, I suppose what Virginia is saying is that, I mean, if I can try to summarize what she's saying, is that parents have to take time to talk to their children and to teach them what is good and what is bad. Yeah, so that's a duty of parents, right?
With social etiquette, would that be?
Social etiquette. Well, what do you? I just man wondering what do you mean by social etiquette?
We're talking about kids. You know, what's the proper way to respect adults? What, or just everyday things, open a door for someone.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. You know, these are these kind of civilities that we have. Kind of make life easier and pleasant, you know, that someone knows when to open the door for another, and the other person appreciates it, and the person does something good that brings some kind of joy. Yes, you know, the social etiquette, you can say, is you know, an important part of education, bringing up children. Common courtesy, yeah. I etiquette, when you talk about etiquette, I think some of the finer points of common courtesy.
Like place settings.
Yeah, no, but that's true, and that's not necessarily, certainly not evil. Sometimes it might be overdone, and people get bent out of shape if the spoon is not exactly placed right. Okay, let's go on to the natural inclination to life in society. When we talk about life in society, we're not just talking about needing other people so that we may live with an amount of ease. Huh? No man is an island. We all depend upon other people. But here we're talking about a deepening of self by our interaction with others. So we might say that a democratic government, as much as there is a democratic government, Aileen, we collaborate with other people in some form or another. Of course, the representatives in Congress and legislatures do to a much greater extent. and this enriches us. We have an understanding of ourselves and understanding of others, understanding what is really good and what is bad because of this inclination that we have for life in society. It's more our idea of freedom is freedom for excellence, perfecting these tendencies that we have, these inclinations that we have, goes very well with our idea of freedom for excellence. We work, we develop virtues so that we may be deep in relations and help one another in society. And so we have some social virtues, familial affection. You go kiss Aunt Lou, huh? And even though you, as a kid, you didn't like to do it, but you did it just because she was your aunt. But more when we get older and we develop friendships and we cultivate good friendships, taking time to be with our friends, talking about our deepest desires and letting other people talk about their hopes and difficulties. Social solidarity so that all might thrive. This is important in our society, and I think it goes back to what Eileen was asking us. Having a solidarity, recognizing that people of color have often experience more difficulty in life precisely because of that, being sensitive to that, so at least they don't experience difficulty because of us, but also perhaps making, helping them when they are having difficulty with others. Excuse me, I should be. The virtues of justice is a particularly important application here. Justice is when we give to the other person that person's due, making sure that people have enough, not just to survive, but to thrive. This is social justice. When we develop these, this virtue, are sensitive to what people need in order to thrive. How say a business transaction often has many aspects, so then make sure that the person's all these aspects requiring justice are satisfied. Of course, friendship is this virtue, and I explained it before when I said listening and expressing our own feelings, reflecting for the friend what is really right and good. Sometimes friends will tell you how to get even, but they that may not be what is called for, and often it isn't just to get even when someone does us wrong, but how we can grow from that experience and not take revenge, but seek reconciliation. Okay, and of course, this society, the church is one form of society. It's a community, and it is very important that the church be a just society, that people can, in the church, perfect this virtue of social social growth, and so that it may be a model to society, to other forms of society. Here, we can say some of the problems that we have in the church. Some of we make precepts of it. Clericalism is wrong. If we think of clericalism as the clergy thinking of themselves as above other people, even though they do have responsibility to for other people, to teach other people. But as St. Augustine once said, with the people, he is a Christian. And this gives him great comfort. And so we have to think of ourselves as with the people. And this, because we know that Christ loves his people, this gives us comfort. Okay, let's try to go through our list of our schema for these. Any more precepts in life and society? This inclination that we have to live with other people and to grow with other people, what precepts can we make?
We can't be racist.
Oh, good. That's right away, huh? That racism is wrong. Very good. Racism, thinking of your race as inherently better than others. Thinking of some way your skin is colored, that's a mark of inferiority. That would be very wrong. Good. Any other precepts? How about we sometimes talk about this around election day, the obligation to vote. This way we put it, the obligation to vote. That might be a precept. Now, there might be certain strategies. You don't vote, as when you have a rigged election, you think the regular election is rigged, so you don't vote. But anyway, this is as a general norm. Yes, we have this. We should vote. Any others?
Treating others who are different with respect.
Okay, treating people who are different than us always with respect. Good.
Father, I would say, besides the racism, close cousins and siblings to that is not to be elitists.
Okay, well, now just see if you can define elitist.
Well, we're whenever it could be in the realms of education, economic wealth, other classes in society, how people divide or look at each other, and where you're taking away or minimizing someone else's human dignity, or you think person thinks they know better always what's for them, but they don't have criticism of their own behaviors that have room.
Yeah, right, yeah. It's kind of a double standard. Elitists think that they have different rights and privileges that other people don't have because they belong to a particular class or a particular race.
Practice humility.
Okay, good. And now we're talking about virtues. What virtues do we need to develop this inclination to reach for excellence? What virtues do we need? And Craig says humility, very important, I would say. Any others? Virtues?
Justice.
Justice, of course, is basic. We know what the person needs, what the person requires, and what is fair in a transaction. Please, Virginia.
Charity.
Charity, excellent. Yeah, we have to having this sense of what is good, doing things for the good of others, we make a better society and find ourselves being deepened and because of our relations with others. How about a commandment? Which of the 10 commandments do you think applies here?
Maybe not coveting.
Okay, not covered your,
the people or things.
For us, it would be the 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet your neighbor's goods. That's part of it. And I was going to think the same way. It's stealing. Life in society demands that that we don't take what belongs to others. Okay, good. Now we'll talk about these inclinations are truly inherent, are truly interior to us, and they're not imposed by others. And so they, our author talks about them being dynamic. As we develop these inclinations, they grow more and more important to us. And yet we can say, and this is the second point there, they contain restrictive formulations. There are negative precepts connected with each one of those 5 inclinations. The inclination to the good and the repulsion of evil, that we don't sin. This is a very simple one and most general. We don't sin. We don't treat others as inferior to ourselves. Every one of those 5 inclinations of the natural law will have these negative precepts and positive precepts as well. But what he's trying to say here is that they come from within. These are not obligations or precepts that are imposed from without. They come, if we're going to develop ourselves as we are inclined to do, we have to abide by these rules that come from, if we're going to have a society where human life thrives, then we can't have a society with, where there's abortion, or for that matter, say, racism. Okay, and then our author talks about how these natural laws, how these inclinations are developed at different stages of our lives. At the first stage, he says, dedicated to learning rules and disciplines. We have to teach our, or we have to impose some rules on our children, because they may have some sense of right and wrong, you know, but unless they are told exactly what to do, they will have trouble discerning what to do in this situation and what not to do. So at a very early age, rules have to be given and expectations made of children. A second stage, as they get older, interiorization of the law from resulting from correspondence between precepts and humanity's deepest aspirations. The child will know when he's acting, when he does a good thing, when he helps a person in need. This is a good thing to do, and so that child will want to do good at other times, want to help more people. So one begins at this stage to follow the law, not from constraint, not because he might be punished, but from attraction and one's own sense of what is good and right. And one discovers that virtue produces joy, that joy, the accomplishment of doing something good beyond the levels of one's initial efforts and trials, that we develop these good ways of doing things, develop this ability to discern what must be done at this time, and so we do it. And then with the third stage, maturity and mastery, where law supports an inventive and creative power within. Here we start to see the presence of the Holy Spirit working within us as we develop our participation in church life. The Holy Spirit will prompt us to do what is good, to avoid, if you will, the occasions of sin, to avoid what might what would be wrong. And then the law, like reason, this is a natural law, is universal in scope. Everyone has a reason to determine what is right and wrong. So this law applies to everyone as we use our reason to discern what should be done. The last chapter, very briefly, the Father Pincares gives a kind of parable on the development of the Catholic moral tradition. He says it started out with Jesus, very brilliant. He talks it like being a flame that Jesus sets, burning in our hearts to do what is good and to avoid what is bad. And we find this very succinctly put together in the Sermon on the Mount. Also, during the initial years of the church, the fathers of the church were able to combine scripture and philosophy and Greek learning. Then he says that in recent years, and I think by this recent years, he means the last maybe 600 years of a relativism setting in. People would do what they want as long as there was no law restricting them. And this is what we have today. So we all know that it's wrong to kill because there's a law against killing. But how about, well, for lack of a better example right now, abortion. Some people think abortion is not bad because, you know, Roe versus Wade said that that we could do it. There's been a kind of a personal preference that's crept into even to our moral theology, as in the last, say, 300 years especially, moral theology would say that there would be freedom unless there was some law against it. and then and so he said this is where the flame wavered for a time. But he would say the oil of the gospel can and must provide fuel again so that it burns brightly, so that people know what to do and have the power to do it. And he sees this by kind of renewal of our spiritual lives, a sense that we have an obligation to that these spiritual realities do exist, and to go to them. We're talking about the Holy Spirit and the virtues. Okay, I want to briefly summarize the classes that we've had. Of course, we've had 6 classes. The first class, we started with the biblical foundations of morality with due emphasis on the Sermon on the Mount. And we saw that the first kind of consideration in thinking about what should be done and what shouldn't be done is what will lead us to true happiness. This was the goal of the ancient philosophers. What will lead us? And Jesus, it seems to be right in line with that in the Gospel of Matthew when he starts with the Beatitudes. What will lead to Beatitudes? In the second class, we talked about the development of moral theology in the time of the fathers of the church, and through Thomas Aquinas, the scholastics of the 13th century. They were able to unite Greek learning, philosophy with the scripture, with our wisdom that we have from the Bible.
Well, not anymore. Almost done.
What?
I heard you there make a yeah.
Okay. Then the third class, we looked at some of the problems that began to set in with modern philosophy, bringing the question of doubt, especially this was Occam that said that nothing real exists except what we can touch. The other things that we have is just kind of names for things, but they really don't exist in themselves. And how this doubting of everything started a movement that's saying freedom, we can do anything that we wish unless there is a law against it, unless God gives us a law against it. That was the idea of that came from Occam. And how the Catholic manualists of the 17th, 18th, and 19th century kind of accepted this idea. No longer were we looking for happiness as the end of our moral life, but just how to avoid sinning. And these were the moralities of obligation that we saw. In the fourth class, we looked at Vatican II's emphasis on scripture and sciences. They said that we have to go back to scriptures, we have to kind of have a dialogue with the world, but how this was somewhat an abandonment of what it led to, not to say that the Vatican Fathers had this in mind, but it led to an abandonment of natural law and a thinking of, we use the term proportionalism, that we can determine the good, the rightness or the wrongness of an action by trying to calculate all its possible effects. And if the good effects outweigh the bad effects that we could imagine, then we would say that that it could be done. But we saw that how this not only led to a kind of utilitarianism where the thing to be done was what gives the greatest good to the greatest number, but it also was an impossible task because we could never really calculate all the goods and the evil effects of any action. The fifth class, we talked about freedom. What is freedom? The two kinds of freedom that is especially prominent in our times: freedom of a difference, where it's a matter of choosing to do or not to do anything, pretty much in an arbitrary, whatever one likes, they could do, unless there was a law prohibiting it. That would be freedom. And we saw, and we tried to contrast that with this freedom for excellence, that we are made in a way, and these are the inclinations, the 5 inclinations of natural law, so that we can become perfect, but do things well, excellently. Freedom is not just to do this or to do that, but to do something well. And so I think the analogy to the playing piano, the concert pianist is really free at the piano because he can do so much, make sounds that everyone wants to hear, rather than the person who's just pouncing on the piano keys. And today we tried to explain the natural law, how it conforms to the freedom of excellence by this capacity, these inclinations that we have to better ourselves, and how we have to develop these inclinations with virtues. So it's 5 minutes after 8:30. Again, I want to thank everybody for sticking with it. I hope it was somewhat worthwhile. And you know what I think I'm going to do? Expect this in your emails sometime, of just a little survey on what has been done, and your thoughts on the way things went. And then I'd like to know what other kinds of classes you wish. I was the main teacher, but also the organizer of a lay ministry formation program in Fort Worth, Texas. And so I have kind of a range of classes to give. Anyway, thank you for those people online. For here are people in class, in the classroom here. I hope that you can profit a little bit by these notes, and I certainly appreciate your support of me, whether monetarily or listening and asking questions. Your interest, that to me is the biggest support, really more important than the other. So let's conclude by saying, glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Okay, anytime you want to write me, ask me questions, or make some comments on the class, I'll be there to listen, to read, and to respond. Take care. Good night. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you, Father. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Peg. No, who did?
Merry Christmas.
How nice of you. So you already done your Christmas baking?
I have done my Christmas baking.
Good for you.